Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Shop with ShopSabre. Me and Nick are having a little fun today, but we're going to piggyback off of last week's episode regarding the options and accessories. First though, obviously, I'm your host, Brandon Bombardo, discussing with Dad Joke Wizard, Nick Peters.
Yes. I just thought of one actually.
Did you? That's good.
So, surprise.
Yeah, I surprised him with this filming of the podcast because normally we do this earlier in the week. It's been kind of a chaotic week for us, and now we're shooting the podcast a little later than normal, but I figured we didn't want to skip this week's episode. So.
It all goes back to me not coming to work the other day. So.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with Nick unexpectedly didn't show up to work on podcast day.
Yeah.
And by unexpectedly, I mean he warned me 24 hours in advance that he wouldn't be here. Yeah, just been a crazy week. Obviously, we got some cold weather this week.
It was cold.
Really cold, and it's actually so cold that school's canceled.
That was great, but it got me a day off work, so that was cool. Not really, because I still sat at my computer.
You got him a day out
in my boxers and a t-shirt and worked all day. That's cool. The best part of it.
Yeah, that's why I didn't rest any Zoom meetings that day.
Oh, I mean, I had a shirt on.
Didn't want to risk it.
Yeah, right. You never know.
Didn't want to risk it there, Nick. Yeah, so we're back with you guys. We thought we had a lot of good feedback off of last week's episode, and we thought, hey, we're going to talk a little bit more about options, accessories, things like that. Hoping to share some kind of tips and tricks with you guys, talk a little bit about like what, where, when, why, kind of make your buying process a little bit smoother, hopefully, as you look at CNC machines and buying this type of technology.
Yeah.
So that's what this week's episode is going to be on. And then the thing that I want to talk about, though, is the Delta Airlines crash.
One of the craziest things I've seen in a long time.
I kind of have a fear for flying that's starting to return.
But at the same time, are you more scared to drive on the roads then? I just feel like there's more idiots on the roads than idiots flying planes.
I think by the statistical, analysis of it, it's proven that like the number of plane crashes versus flights a day, like I think statistically your odds of being in a vehicle accident are higher.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't run that myself recently, but I used to have this real fear for flying when I was younger.
Really?
Yeah, it was weird. I actually didn't I grew up around airplanes. My dad has his pilot's license. Bunch of my family members do. And so my grandpa actually used to rebuild old airplanes and we'd go flying with them. So I grew up around airplanes, and my uncle scared the hell out of me one time by just letting go and being like, well, if you don't take control, we're going to die. And I was probably 12. And I don't know why, but that memory is vivid that I remember the fear.
What did you do?
I had to fly the airplane.
Did you know how, or did you just wing it?
I just winged it.
That was good.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
That wasn't even a real one I had planned either.
That was a good one.
So dumb.
But yeah, I did. I just kind of had to figure it out. And obviously, my uncle was there. He wasn't going to let us perish, right? But he made me at 12. You fear that's really what's going to happen. I don't know why. Sure. I don't know why at 12 years old you just assume that's really what's going to happen. But it kind of wrecked it for me. It made flying really a not fun thing for me anymore. And
were you always afraid they were going to ask you to come to the cockpit and fly?
No, at that point I was just afraid of being in the air. I don't know why. It just kind of made me nervous. And then for work, I started having to fly a lot more. And you don't have a choice.
Yeah,
here you go. And I've become really comfortable with it. But then you start to see these things happening, and it's just man, is it just being announced more? Has it been happening this whole time and you just didn't know?
So I did see somebody put out a graph I saw floating around Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
And even with all the stuff that was going on this year, plane accidents or aviation accidents is what they called it, for January and February of this year, we're still a lot lower than
last year.
So
yeah.
I don't know. Is it more that these are just bigger airlines?
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know.
I don't know it either. But I actually just flew not too long ago, actually a couple weeks ago, and it was fine. They did a great job. I mean, again, I think the industry is heavily regulated in a lot of ways, and probably more so than a lot of industries. So I'm just, it's a common topic right now. So I thought it was a good thing to have in current events this week. So
I went on my first flight when I was 21 years old.
Mine was when I was commercial flight for me was when I was 21 years old, I think.
And we flew to South Carolina to go on a golf trip. we had to like fly out over the ocean and take a hard left
yeah.
over the water to go back in.
So they had
I was on the window. I mean, I was on the window on that side. Scared the bejesus out of me. I was like, what am I doing here?
Yep, I get it.
It wasn't just a straight shot and land. It was out over the ocean. No.
My first commercial flight was by myself, 21 years old, going to Cancun.
Oh, geez.
And same thing, like, and it was actually a work thing, believe it or not, at that time. And yeah, when you fly out over, the Gulf, I was just like, oh Lord, what am I doing right now? Like, I remember that fear, like, settling in, but
hope you know how to swim.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, like I said, then the other thing that was in the news was the cold weather, which I think is finally beyond us, right?
Let's hope, right?
Finally, let's go. Finally moving towards summer.
Like almost 50 early next week.
Woo!
There won't be any snow left, that's for sure.
Belinda Peters, I like when you talk that way.
Right? So
50s.
First rooftop podcast on Tuesday when it's nice out?
Let's do it. I was on the roof yesterday, actually.
I heard that.
Yep. Had to fix the heater yesterday.
You just kind of do everything, huh?
Just a jack of all trades.
Clearly it's
a master of none.
Did you fix it? Doesn't feel like it's working yet. I don't think you did.
It's definitely working.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I just remember yesterday it was like 197 degrees in here, and Chad almost died
because we forgot to turn the heat back down. The thermostat was on like 94. So to get the heater to kick on, you got to turn the heater up. Well, then we got the heater working. We got everything working. Well, I didn't remember to go down and turn the heat back down. My poor Chad is in the meeting in this room, and he's got this room closed off, and the heater is just pouring heat in here. And I remembered about 3/4 of the way through his meeting, and I ran over there quick and turned it down.
He comes out looking like he just spent the last 3.5 hours in a sun.
I felt so bad for him. Oh, poor Chad.
And then he gets a day off today, so whatever. It all evens out.
I'll take a day off today, so
yeah, he'll be fine. Playing hockey?
Yeah, we did. We played some hockey. Actually, we were in Duluth this weekend.
I saw that.
Came up 1.6 seconds short of a shutout.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I felt really bad for my son. He played a heck of a game. They ended up winning 2-1, but yeah, the team, you know how it is, like 5 seconds ago, everybody kind of just gets the like attitude, like, yeah, game over. The other team did not get that attitude.
Good on them though, right?
Right. I mean, good for them to play all the way to the end. Our team learned a tough lesson because, yeah, they just let the kids skate, and suddenly they were on a 2-0 against my son, and 1.6 seconds later, yeah, goal.
I would have just like chucked my stick at the guy with the puck. I know you can't do that, but
my son actually has probably replayed that in his head a million times, and he's told me at this point that he wishes he would have just chopped the kid's legs with a stick. That's what he's like, Dad, I should have just whacked him in the legs and made him fall down so he couldn't keep skating. He goes,
take the penalty, not the goal.
That's what he said. He's like, take the penalty. He's like, it's 1.6 seconds, Dad. I'm like, not a bad plan next time. So I feel bad for the next kid that has the puck near him with 1.6 seconds left.
Right across the shins.
Right across the shins. But I mean, he learned. Oh well,
it happens.
It is.
That was what it is time.
Yeah. Did you bring any questions or?
Yeah, we did actually. We got some good ones. Good. First one is, you got your little button to push, or should I just do it?
Let's just do it.
Customer questions and comments.
There you go. Nailed it.
Question number 1. You said to have fun, so I'm having fun.
I'm ready.
Why are there so many dust skirt options? Why not just include the upgrade skirt with the machine standard?
That's actually a really good question. For one, you're right. There are a lot of dust attachment options, I would say. A lot of people call them skirts, dust attachment, dust boots, whatever you want to call them. But the reality is there isn't like a one size fits all when it comes to dust collection. And a lot of times with dust collection, as you think about your application, people only think about what they do.
Yep.
So to them, the obvious is, well, if I have this upgraded one, why isn't that standard? Well, for your application, that's available, and that's why it's an upgrade, right? But the next person we talk to has a completely different application, and that skirt that now you're upgrading to may not fit their application. And so that's the real reason why we don't just include like a set skirt that way. I mean, we give you kind of a universal skirt, right? And it's good for all things, but it's not great at any one thing, right?
Yep.
And it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife, right? Does a lot of things, but not any one thing in particularly better than the other, right?
And then depending on what tool changer you have also affects that.
Correct. That's what I was just gonna say, is then the options that you choose will vary with that as well, because different tool changers require different clearances. So there's some different things in there, but I want people to think about like flat machining, right? If you machine a piece of material that is flat, like a cabinet, as an example, well, the dust skirt can ride really low to the surface because that surface level doesn't change. However, if you do something like topographical maps, right? If you do something 3D, where now you're having a lot of up and down Z motion change. Well, if you're cutting a big like bowl or a dish, Well, when that bit comes down into that dish, that skirt comes down with it. Well, the problem is like close riding skirts, like the dust stock, for example, they're not intended for that because as you go down the dish, they're going to literally hit the material.
Yep.
So then that causes a bigger issue with either wrecking your material, ripping the skirt off. There's so many different things that can happen there. And then you also have to take into consideration the bit length largely varies based on what you're doing. And I think that's the biggest problem with dust collection that people run into is that they use the wrong tool length for the application. You know, when they're cutting 3/4 inch material, they're not using a tool designed to just cut 3/4 inch material. They're using more of a universal tool that might be 3 or 4 inches long.
Right.
Well, you don't need a bit that long to cut 3/4 inch material. So like getting the right tool will help you with dust collection. So
Great answer.
Yeah.
Number 2. Why use ball screw drives instead of rack and pinion?
Well, actually, there's a couple ways to answer that. The question I always start with when somebody asks me that question is, what do you do? Because that'll determine what I think is the right technology. Because both technologies exist in this market for a reason, right? They both have their pros and their cons, right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest cons with ball screws is cost. They cost more money. So for low cost applications, they don't make sense. However, one of the biggest cons to rack and pinion is generally going to be longevity and accuracy, right? It is inherently going to have more play because it's a gear. And as you can see my hands right now, the gears, as they come together, you know, they create, you know, backlash and there's some slop in there. It's not perfect because if it was a perfect fit, it wouldn't rotate. So it's got to have some play in there. And so as you look at that thought process, ball screw versus rack and pinion really depend on what is the ultimate goal. And if the goal is accuracy, ball screw makes sense. It's a more accurate technology. It's a ball bearing. If the goal is just straight speed, right? You don't have to have a lot of accuracy to it, or there isn't a lot of rigidity required, then rack and pinion will be quicker because there's less moving components there. But they both exist for a reason. But you know, the reason we use ball screws over rack and pinion as our primary source is going to be the accuracy standpoint. Our machines are built to be a more precise, a more, you know, dependable solution long-term.
Yep.
And ball screws tend to have a longer life expectancy. They're going to be a higher accuracy just head to head at this price point. Now, obviously, if you can spend, you know, a lot more money, you can get up into that $200,000, $300,000 price point. Now you can do things to rack and pinion to make them more accurate, and you can buy more expensive electronics that will compensate for the backlash. But that's why they cost $250,000.
Yep.
Versus if you're trying to keep something affordable like we are, we're trying to keep our machines obtainable by, you know, first-time users, then ball screw is the best form of motion when it comes to that technology. So that would be the reason why we choose ball screw.
Got it. I like it.
Yeah.
Number 3 is more of just a comment testimonial type thing.
Okay.
Just got my ShopSabre 23. Have a lot to learn still, but ShopSabre builds these things right and has awesome support. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot for me to reply to that one. I think that one is a testament to what we do. I mean, obviously, again, the 23 is a full ball screw driven machine instead of rack and pinion like it's competition. I mean, most of the machines of its equal price point are rack and pinion. And so I think it stands a lot, you know, a lot better in terms of longevity. It's going to build, you know, some confidence in the machine because it does produce a higher cutting force. It does allow for higher accuracy than the typical machine in that price point. Now they're not mills. I mean, I always try to remind people that they're not a milling center, but they do have a lot of the technology you would find in mills, right? With the ball screws and the upgraded motors and the heavier frames. So yeah, it's cool to hear people, you know, when they own the 23, you know, or really any of our machines, but there is always a lot to learn, right? This technology can open a lot of doors for you, and I don't think you can ever stop learning, but
No.
It's cool to hear people, you know, having success with the machine. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate the comment. Anything else? Are we there?
That's it for that one.
That's it. Okay.
Audience question of the week.
Yeah. So it's my turn to ask some questions then, I guess. So my question that I put together this week, and I apologize, I'm going to look down to read this, but my audience question was, when buying something new, how much research do you do versus how much do you rely on the information provided up front to you? So as you go out and buy a product, whatever it is going to be, if it's a new TV, if it's a new car, if it's a new piece of equipment, a software piece, whatever, how much research are you doing on your own privately versus how much are you relying on the information provided to you?
I think for me personally, it's kind of depends on what it is
Yeah.
and what the investment really
Fair.
is about, right?
That's fair.
I don't know, like you said, if you're going to buy a new car, a new machine, a new piece of software, whatever it is, obviously you're going to put a lot of time and effort into doing something like that. But if you see like, I don't know, a new brand of cereal that looks good, buy it and try it. If you have to throw it out because it costs you $3 because it's not good, so be it, right?
That's a fair assessment. Yeah. I would probably say I'm in the same boat. Like certain things I'm not going to spend a lot of time researching because it's not worth it.
Right.
Right. Like my time is worth more than the product kind of costs me.
Yeah.
So maybe I just try it. But when it comes to business investments, I'm really big on taking the information that's given to me, right? And then reviewing it. So I think, I'm really big on if your product comes with literature, I'll read all of it, right? I'll read all the product literature, but then I'm going to ask some questions. I'm the kind of guy that's going to ask questions. I'll give you an opportunity to explain. And I'm the guy that's going to just flat out tell you, hey, I'm looking at your product and this other product. What's the difference?
Yep.
And I'm big on that. Like nobody's going to be able to tell me more about your product than you.
I think, and on that same vein, do you think when you ask those questions, can you tell the difference when somebody's just like reading off a script or when they're actually like have knowledge of the product and they're telling you what they think makes a difference?
Absolutely. I think passion alone comes through in a conversation.
Yeah.
So somebody who's passionate about what they sell or what they offer will be able to talk about that. And a lot of times I can feed off that passion and ask more questions. But the other side that I love about it is it gives me the opportunity to know who I'm working with. Because if I ask you a question and you answer the question or you can get me the information, and then I ask your competition the same question, I can gauge the difference of information I've received back.
Yep.
And a lot of times that tells me a lot about the company. If it's a quick, they just want to get through the question and move on. They don't really care about my business necessarily, versus somebody who's willing to spend the time going through it and, helping understand what it is and educate me. I feel more confident after the fact that they're going to be there should I need help. So
I'd rather spend that 5 minutes talking to them rather than 30 seconds with somebody else, even if they're telling me stuff that I necessarily didn't ask or didn't really think to ask. At least they take the time to tell me and explain it that way, right?
Agreed. No, I think that's true. So again, in the comments section, we'd love to hear from you. When buying something new, how much research do you do versus how much do you rely on the information provided you up front? Love to hear from you guys on that one. So leave it in the comments section. We always try to read through them, and obviously we try to bring up conversation pieces in future episodes based on those. So let's jump into it. How does that sound?
Let's go.
Let's go. So quick recap for you guys that maybe didn't tune in last week, but we talked about options and accessories. We talked specifically on like the spindles, right? We talked about drill heads, tool changers. We talked a little bit about that. We talked about unloading and loading material. We talked about hold down, how you secure the material. And we actually talked about a lot of the horsepower stuff too, right? 5 versus 10 horsepower. But, I want to talk a little bit about like, where do you start to look at this stuff, right? And I think the first thing that we got to talk about is like identifying your need as a company, right? I think that's the biggest focus when you're buying any product. It doesn't have to be CNC related, right? And that's why I want to talk about this is when we talk about accessories and options about CNC last week, I thought about to myself, there's a bigger, broader conversation that could be had here. And that is on in general, when you're buying something, right? Yep. And I think the first thing that you have to really look at before you make any upgrades, before you add any accessories, before you do anything to any product, right? Your modification to the standard base model is understand what is your specific need, right? And if it's your shop's need or your, home's need or your family's need, whatever it is, identify what that need is before you really go crazy. Because I think it's easy for us to just want all the bells and whistles.
For sure.
Right?
And what's the point of buying something that isn't necessarily going to help, right?
Correct. Like I look at me buying cars as an example. When I was younger, I was foolish. I was really foolish with car purchases. I'd buy a car and I'd buy everything.
I feel like one could say now you might be foolish buying cars sometimes too.
You think so?
I don't know. Maybe.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
I mean, race cars.
Oh, those are foolish all around. Okay.
That was more the joke.
You got me there. You got me there.
Yeah.
But no, truly, I'm thinking about like a family vehicle. When I was 18 years old, I bought my first brand new vehicle. I bought the one with everything because who doesn't want to own every option?
For sure.
And then I was 20 and I bought another vehicle. And I traded that one in and lost my butt and bought another one and all the bells and whistles and all the bells and whistles and just kept doing this, compounding this to the point where it's like I was so negative equity in all these vehicles that by the time I paid them off, like I just lost,
Yep.
But now as a as I look at my life today, I don't buy the highest trim level ever anymore. And I'm kind of like a la carte. I'll go into a dealership and be like, when I bought my wife's new vehicle, I was like, okay, we want this, this, and this. And they're like, okay, well, we can get you this. It's gonna have all the, like, I don't care about that. I just want these features. Like, what's the best way to keep the price in line? Give me those. Oh, okay, well, then you need the EX package with the special this, whatever it is. Yeah. And we can get you those things, and then you could pay for the black wheels.
Sure.
Right? Because she wanted the black trim package. Okay. That makes sense, because what's the price of that? Okay, the price of that vehicle is X amount versus the fully loaded is 30 grand more.
Right.
I don't need
We're
that.
going to use 2 of those 20
Correct.
features.
And that's it. Well, you have them, and it's like, do you really does it make driving the vehicle any less efficient for you? No. Like, okay, yeah, the back seat doesn't have heated seats. No offense, I don't care about the back seat. I'm not sitting there.
Right.
And like, my kids are fine.
Yeah, they don't care.
Like, and I've had buddies already, and I joke about this. I've got 2 buddies that rode with me to our tournament. And they're like, where's the heated seats back here? I'm like, don't have them. They're like, oh, you cheap ass, just giving me a hard time. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't sit back there like, yeah, your butt's cold, not mine. Yep. I don't know. So it's like, as I think about that, what's my needs, right? Or what's your shop needs? When you're buying your piece of equipment, yeah, it's great to go buy a $250,000 piece of equipment. Does your shop need justify a $250,000 piece of equipment?
Right.
Probably not. I would find that most shops, and I find it humorous because we have customers of ours who have bought ShopSabres as the first machine, made a bunch of money with their ShopSabre, and that allows them to grow and affords them the ability to buy these next level machines, right? Competitors' brands. I'm not going to name brands, but they buy it. And then when they go talk online, all they talk about is this new brand that they bought.
Right.
And how this is what everybody needs. And it's like, but you didn't buy it first either and couldn't afford it the first time either.
Right.
So like these brands, like who we are as a company, we aren't trying to be the machine for everything. We're trying to be the machine for everyone, right? Get you into a CNC machine, get you able to make money, get you able to grow your business. And for some people, they never outgrow the technology. It works for what they need. They don't need to go spend $250,000.
And at the same time, like if you're going to sit and talk about, having that big, giant, expensive machine, why not talk about the backstory that got you there?
Correct.
Like, what did you use to build yourself to that point? Like,
and
you didn't just get there overnight.
And the problem is, I think that people who don't know their backstory just assume that's where they started.
Right.
And it puts businesses in a bad place because people take other people's advice. Well, he did it and he's successful. I'm going to go buy one too. They buy it. Suddenly their initial investment was $250,000 or more versus $60,000.
That was 10 years prior.
Correct. And now they're struggling to get by with what they, and they're having a hard time keeping their business afloat, and they can't understand how other people do. Then they start to doubt their ability, thinking they're doing something wrong. Like, no, you jump too far down the line.
Yep.
Right. So
one giant leap instead of baby steps.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's the same way I built my racing program. The first race car I ever bought was destroyed race car in some guy's back field that I fixed and put a few dollars into here and there and bought used parts and did this. And yeah, it wasn't the nicest car I've ever owned, but it got me experience on the track. And when I got a little better, I bought better motor, I bought a better suspension, and then eventually bought a better car. And now I have a car that when people look at it, they're like, man, I wish I could have that. Do it one step at a time. Yep. You don't have to buy it all at once. And so that's how I kind of look at things. And so as you kind of look at your efficiencies in your shop, and that's kind of some of my notes here about, is that identifying what specific downtimes are you going to have associated with what you're about to do, right? And identifying any issues that could arise, things being space, right? Buying big machines is great, but if it eats up all your space, now you're in trouble, right?
Right, yeah.
I think the human, go-to is buy as much as I can, as big as I can, as fast as I can, right?
Right.
The problem is space is valuable.
100%, especially with a, business of that sort, right?
Right.
You're not going to be wanting to store your materials outside because you have no room in your shop.
Right.
For what you're going to be cutting. And then you have to go outside, pick them up and bring them in to use them instead of having them inside your shop right by your machine.
Right. And you think about material movement, exactly, having to move materials around or your product storage. And, my thing is yeah, it's great to have a 6x12 table, but what do you cut every day? What's your need?
Right.
Well, I cut 4x8 99% of the time. So why buy anything bigger than a 4x8 machine?
Zero reason for that.
Right. Well, 1% of the time I cut a 5x10. Okay. So how much money do you make off of buying 5x10 versus how much space you're going to give up? Is it necessary? And then the next question is, where are you going in the future, right? What is your future goals? Because maybe your future goal is to go into some other area that is going to require 5x10. Then you should plan for the future, right?
Yep.
It might make sense, but determine the gap, right? You have to figure out what that gap is between your capabilities today and then what is your customer demand or future expectations going to be tomorrow, because that'll help you kind of tailor, okay, how much space should I give up? What options should I buy today?
Yep.
And some of that's just conducting a review or an audit of your own facility, right? Talk a little bit about the processes that you have today. Talk about current performances, right? Maybe you have a machine. What does your current machine do that you like?
Right.
Share that. Think about that. What does your current machine do or your current process do that you don't like? Share that too, because then you can okay, I'm struggling with this. Is there a way to fix that? That could be a big part of what you're doing. And then you have to really set a clear goal when it comes to that. You have to know, what are you trying to achieve long term? Well, I'm trying to increase the speed of our shop, right? How much throughput we can put in. Or I'm trying to make our parts more accurate. I don't want to have to, I'm just throwing things out there. I don't want to say on these parts, right? Or I don't want to have to deburr these parts or whatever you do. That you need to understand what you're trying to, accomplish.
Yep.
And then, I mean, it can go as far as material waste, right? Then understand that. Like, are we trying to have better yield? Because that's the thing that I've noticed with a lot of cabinet companies. You can cut cabinets by hand, but your yield tends to be a lot worse.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Where if you can do a nested operation on a CNC machine, suddenly now you have a lot less throwaway, a lot less scrap, a lot less waste, better yield, better, use of the product you're buying, and therefore your cost of doing business is actually better controlled.
For sure. And I think that kind of leads into the next thing. You have to prioritize what you're going to upgrade, right?
Right.
Don't just upgrade something that's not going to bring you anything back.
That's actually, that's a really good point, because it's so easy to prioritize wants over needs.
Yep.
And I think, I do it. Admittedly, there's times that I'm like, I really want that. So I'm going to buy something frivolous.
Sure.
And then you realize that was stupid. I shouldn't have bought that. I really need this. And maybe you have to sell something and buy something different, or you just can't buy what you need because you've used your finances on your want.
I was just going to say, like, you could take the difference in price between that 4x8 machine and the 6x12 machine.
Yep.
And use those funds and allocate them towards something else in your shop that you also need to upgrade or add to your shop to reach the goals that you set prior, right?
Well, right. And I mean, the thing that you have to remember too is that not all upgrades are created equal, right?
Yep.
So just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Sure.
And, I think it's important to prioritize what the greatest ROI is going to be for your return on your investment, right? What is the greatest return to me? Having a machine is probably a better investment to me than having a big machine, right?
Yes.
Like, not being able to do anything or having to outsource it versus having to outsource 1% of what we do.
Right.
That's where you have to start to look at, like, 1% outsourcing may be more acceptable than buying this massive machine and then hurting 99% of your process because you tried to do 1% more.
Correct.
So that's something you have to think about, is like, what's your short-term return on your investment, right? Like, does the upgrade save you any time, money, effort, anything right now? What's your long-term ROI, right? What does the future look like? Can I grow into this machine? Can I grow with the machine? Am I going to have to increase my shop capacity because this machine takes up so much space? I need a bigger shop.
Yep.
Like, are there other things that become a bigger hurdle later because of the investment you're making? And then scalability. Maybe I don't need to buy all the bells and whistles today. We talked about drill heads last week. Drill head, again, for people who maybe didn't catch last week's episode, is the multi-gang drill. It drills multiple holes at one time. There's a lot of cabinet guys who feel like they need that right away, because I cut cabinets. Why wouldn't I?
Sure.
But when they actually look at the ROI on it, it doesn't make sense to have the drill head. I would say 90% of customers who we talk to find out they don't need a drill head. And that being said, adding a drill head is something that you can look at as scalable later on, if you buy the right machine. And that's something people need to think about, because certain models can't have a drill head.
Yep.
So if you see yourself looking in the future going, we do get into a lot of closets, or I see myself getting into a lot of closets, well, suddenly now the drill head makes sense. So even though you don't do it today, maybe you should jump up to a model that is compatible with the drill head, just so later on you have the ability to jump into that as you need without having to replace the machine.
Right. And that goes back to prioritizing the options that you need right now. Right. But then also leaving yourself the flexibility to get to where you're going to grow into.
And that's the truth. Yep. It's making sure that you have given yourself a growth avenue, right? And then, smaller shop upgrades that, I think people think about is, like auto tool changers. I think they're sometimes overlooked because they're a small shop. People are like, I'm a small shop, I don't need a tool changer. smaller shops, you should have a tool changer. Like that's all the more reason to have a tool changer. Like to me, you have less affordable wasted labor, right? You can't just give labor away and spend time changing bits and babysitting a machine. You need to reduce your downtime.
Right. Maximize the other things you can do.
Right. Exactly. So that tool changer a lot of times has an ROI of 3 months, right? It pays for itself. Medium-sized shops, as you start to look at like your investments and where you're going, you start to think about things like dust collection, material handling. Those, the tool changer is an obvious, right? But I don't want to spend time cleaning up because we put so much material through. So I want a bigger dust collector. Or I don't want my guy sitting here trying to lift these sheets because sheet number 1 of the day is a lot lighter for some reason than sheet number 900 of the day.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the material gets heavier throughout the day. But you have to think about those improvements, right? And how that makes a difference. And then, prioritizing, as you said, it solves some of your bigger challenges later on. Prioritizing anything in your shop can help you from making mistakes that were otherwise, preventable.
Right. Yeah.
So, that's the thing. And so jumping ahead, I kind of look at getting the most out of your CNC options is really what's important to me. As I start to think about investing in a CNC machine as an example, or any product in your shop, as you invest something, it's only worthwhile if you get something out of it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's really not probably worth your time, right? And if you're not utilizing an option, was it worth that investment?
It doesn't seem like it would be. No, I'm not using it.
Cool to say you have it, right?
Sweet. So I have this drill block, and all it does is collect dust. I never really use it.
Right, and it goes back to the same statement of like the heated seats in my truck. Having heated seats in my back seat of my truck when I ride by myself to work 90% of my driving,
right,
doesn't make sense.
Right, and when the kids are back there, they don't care. They don't even think about it.
My kids sit in a booster seat. They're young enough where like the law requires them to sit in a booster. They're not going to feel the heated seat anyways.
Right.
Like it just doesn't make sense to me. So, I think about that in the way of like getting the most out of your options. So like, as you look at training, I look at that option. People can add training or education. It ensures that your team is going to be there to help you learn how to run a machine. So like for us, it's not an option. We include training with our equipment, but some people make that optional. Well, to me, that you should be factoring that in. If they are giving you training with the machine, you need to factor it in because you're going to get less use out of your machine and success if you simply just don't.
Well, I think the biggest thing for that specific, the training part of it.
Yeah.
I get emails and phone calls from people all the time. Hey, I lost my guy running my CNC. Can I get somebody there for training? You can't just assume that your guy is going to be there forever. So if he leaves and then you just don't have any options for training with some other machine you bought, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Honestly, if you don't know how to run it and then you lose the only guy that you had that did, you're kind of screwed.
A machine becomes a giant paperweight really quickly.
Yeah.
I think integration's a big part of it. I think that can be said with that. When you're making an upgrade to something, you have to integrate it into your processes. How smoothly does that happen? Do you have to assemble the machine yourself? Do you have to wait for a tech to come out there and do this? Like there are a lot of factors there too, because I think a lot of people lose track of that too, is this something you can do? Right. Are you looking at that process? Because there are a lot of complex pieces of equipment out there where you can't do it yourself. So there's an overhead that you're going to absorb now because you have to pay a tech to come out. Or if anytime something happens, there's an invested cost that you have to incur. People don't think about those things because sometimes buying a $300,000 machine is cool, but you're not working on your $300,000 machine anymore. Now you're paying a guy all the time.
Right. Or if it arrives to you in pieces and you have to spend a week putting it together and you lose a week of production time.
Well, I go back to cars because that's my thing, right? My dad taught me this when I was younger. When I was 18, I was into cars. I still am into cars, but like when I was buying cars, I always laughed because I was like, Dad, why don't more people just drive these cool cars? Because like you could find Maseratis and these cool cars that were listed for well below what they were new, right? They're $180,000 cars that people are selling for $50,000 and $60,000. So why wouldn't I just buy one, right? It'd be cool to say I drive around a Maserati. And my dad was like, slow down. Like, I'll never forget this. I remember my dad telling me this, like, slow down. You got to think about what you're about to buy. He's like, it's not about the cost of the car. Do you know what the Maserati or the Ferrari or what their maintenance programs look like? Do you know what goes into operating and maintaining one of those vehicles? He's like, your oil changes can be hundreds of dollars. Hundreds. Right now, you could do an oil change yourself on your Jetta, right? Because I had a Jetta. He's like, on your Jetta, you can do an oil change yourself. It costs you $25 in material, right?
Yeah.
He's like, you bring this to a dealer and they have to do it because of everything that has to be done. And if you don't do it, then you potentially cause bigger problems. And it made me realize that like, it's not just the cost of the purchase, but it's the cost of the ongoing, maintenance and things like that. And that's something with machines is routine maintenance. And so people lose track of that. Like, how easy is this machine to keep running? How easy is it to maintain the accuracy and the peak performance? And there's so many other things that go into these machines that people a lot of times don't think about. And a $300,000 machine is cool. Don't get me wrong. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But is it really like going to make you more money? Not always.
And is it worth all the time and potential headaches that's going to go into keeping it running?
Right. Well, the other thing is, are you going to use its full capacity, its full capabilities? That's something, I think a lot of people think about when they're doing upgrades and options. If you're going to add an option to your machine or you're going to add an upgrade, does that option justify its expense, right? If I'm going to spend $100,000 on a piece of equipment versus a machine that's $90,000, for that $10,000, am I going to get a return on that investment? Sometimes the answer is yes, and it's easy. Sometimes the answer is no, because it's just I joke with people like there's companies and products out there that you can add lighting kits and things like that, where it's just like, it's a cool thing.
Right.
But by the machine being able to light up blue at night, do you make more money? No. Go buy some LEDs on Amazon for a fraction of the cost, put them on there if you really want to make the machine light up blue.
Right.
Right? Like, it's that. Like, I think about that and, it's, thinking about how you're going to do this in your business. Like, it's more than just the cool factor. Don't get me wrong. I buy stuff because it's cool too. But there's also, like, when it comes to business, it's a different mentality. I don't buy stuff for cool in business. I buy stuff for practicality in business.
I was going to say logically speaking.
And then the other thing is, are you going to push the limits? Are you going to be able to push this machine to its full capacity? Are you going to be afraid to experiment with the machine? Because I think that's what the other thing I found is when people buy like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 machines, they become very one-dimensional because they're afraid to push the limits.
To wreck it.
It's a $500,000. I'm not doing that on there. Well, what's the point of buying it if you can't use the thing, right?
Right. Like, are you only going to drive a car 100 miles an hour if it's a Corvette?
Right.
I mean, I'll go and try to drive my little minivan type thing, whatever it is, 100 miles, I'll see what happens. You know what I'm saying? But that's the thing though. Like, I don't know.
I just look at it from a standpoint of it's like a collector car at that point. They're cool to own, but they sit in the garage because everybody's afraid to scratch them.
Right.
Like, my dad has a old Corvette, really old one, bought for really cheap. It was a farmed car, actually. So it's like the paint's peeling off it and it's scratched. It looks terrible. But he'll drive it to the hardware store and it's like an old Corvette. He drives it to the hardware store and he'll throw like concrete in the trunk. He doesn't care.
That's freaking awesome.
Because he's like, he uses it. He drives it. But everywhere he goes, people are like, oh, that's such a cool car. Because it's a legit car. People like, they know it's an old car, but he drives it, and
not a one of them will be throwing cinder blocks in the back seat.
Some guy said I remember being with my dad, we were filling up fuel one time, and the guy was sitting there at the fuel pump, and he's like, I can't believe, he goes, what do you say? I can't believe the car looks like that, or something like that. And my dad's so witty. He just turns, looks at me, and goes, shit, when I'm 70 years old, I hope I look that good. And I just laughed because this is like many, many years ago. And it was just like,
awesome.
It was, it was an older car, but it's like, it's just funny because like people get this mentality that you can't use machines or you can't use you need to use them. That's what they're designed for. And having the options allow you to use the machine so you can use it correctly and functionality.
That's what you bought it for, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yep. And then, it kind of moves you forward into like making the adjustments necessary for your business to grow. Because if you don't want to scale your shop, then keep doing what you're doing. Right? I mean, it's simple as that. Like, don't change a thing and don't expect anything to change.
Just be comfortable with what you have, right?
Right.
And
But if you're evolving, right? You're buying equipment, you're doing things, you need to keep up with your upgrades then, right? So you need to look at the upgrades that are on your machine. And then you need to say, okay, what can I upgrade today that is needed? What can I upgrade tomorrow for future growth? Like, start to think about your business and like, where do you go? The sustainability of the machine. Like, yeah, there are machines that you can buy cheap. They have zero forward compatibility. That machine is only good for what it's good for today, and in 3 years you're replacing it.
And I think on that same thing, like there with making adjustments that are going to help you grow, like there's things that can help multiple aspects of your business grow at the same time, right?
Right.
I mean, if you have higher or order volume and new customers,
right,
you can fix those with getting a bigger machine or a faster machine.
Correct.
You can kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone
Yep.
by buying one thing, and I think that's the thing you can look at too.
Well, I think that's an important part of it is that, like there are a lot of people that we sell machines to that they're like, well, I only cut 5 sheets a week right now. Okay, well, you're not buying for the 5 sheets you're doing today. You're thinking about the 20 sheets you're going to do next year. Like and you start to think about like the next step, and it's you're buying for the future. You're buying something you can grow into, not something you're going to grow out of.
Or you're not buying something that you're going to get you through what you're doing right now. It can be the same, right? Like you want to not overspend, but buy something
that's
bigger to make bigger capacity for your shop, right?
And that's where like new customer demand is going to kind of lead you places. I think people, I've used this word, we've all seen it in the movies, but it's if you build it, they will come, right? It's the same mentality with the CNC world. Like when you buy a CNC machine, you get more customers. Like people just start to find out you have it, or they start pushing the envelope. Oh, you got a CNC, so you can do this. And they start kind of like asking more of you. The demand and the quality kind of goes up.
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about, probably a couple months ago now, but you can tell people yes more.
Right.
And you're not going to be the guy that people always know that you're going to go to and say, oh, no, sorry, can't do it.
We had a customer that, remember that we had a testimonial a couple months ago. That customer had said that on the show that, he's been able to become the yes man. He said people bring him things that they wouldn't have brought him before. And I think the thing that people don't realize is a lot of times when you're buying a machine, I had a customer of ours that called me up after buying a machine, and he was in tears almost when we were talking. And he said he had the biggest year he'd ever had in his life. And I was talking with him. I'm like, well, what'd you change? He goes, nothing. He goes, I had the biggest year of my life and I didn't do anything different than I was doing before. The only difference was I didn't say no as much.
Yep.
He's like, I did the same advertising. I did the same stuff. But when people came to me, I was able to say yes. And he goes, and at the time, I didn't feel like I was taking on any more work because we were doing it so efficiently that I felt like I was working the same amount as I worked before. But at the end of the year, when I've done my taxes, it's unbelievable what I accomplished this last year.
Right.
And
probably actually work quite a bit less.
Right. And that's exactly what we talked about is like the actual physical strain it puts on you, not doing it manually versus doing it automated. Like you notice it.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the big thing is, so as you start to like thinking about like your team's capacity and being able to like not wear your guys out, right, and work the overtime hours, it becomes a scalable solution, right? It becomes something that you can grow into. And then you can start looking at other things like we talked about, the loaders, the unloaders, the vacuum lifts. These sort of things can be added to your shop and scale your production.
Yes.
Right. And, software upgrades, there's better software out there for everything, software is always advancing, right? So you can upgrade your packages. And I mean, it's even like Outlook. I look at like Microsoft Outlook, where it is today versus where it was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like the AI technology that exists now and the ability to just track your emails. And I just, you start to think about that. And then what about cabinet software? What about sign software? Like so much there. And then you start looking at special functions of a machine, like special tool holders and fixtures that you can create or upgrades that you can do for fixturing or holding down materials and accommodating different types of material. Like there's so many other things that you can start to look at within the ecosystem of what you do.
Yep. It's basically, staying ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah.
Just consistently evaluating what your capabilities are.
Correct.
And investing in upgrades at the right time.
Right.
It's going to help you.
And I think that's the big thing that you have to think about is it's like evaluation is a big part of growth. Evaluating everything at all times and making sure that you know why you're doing it and what you're doing.
Make sure it makes sense.
Right.
Don't just do it to do it.
Yep. Because, basically implementing.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. What am I trying to say here? Implementing change is a lot of times the hardest thing to like accept.
People don't like it.
Right.
Like especially in that kind of environment where you're going to implement a CNC where people are used to doing it
right
the same way they've been doing it. Like that's a huge change because they probably are like, oh great, they're bringing in this machine now. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Where are they going to find work for me to do?
Well, think about it. I just implemented a new phone system here at ShopSabre, which I apologize to anybody who's watching this who has dealt with some of the problems I've dealt with. I mean, I've been working through them, but like implementing upgrades without disruption to your business is super hard.
Oh yeah.
So the thing is smooth transition is a key part of what you're doing. So you want to have something that is going to minimize your downtime and really avoid it altogether if you can and help with your workflow. Because like when I implemented this phone system, our phones were down for 15 minutes maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say like 5.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was 15. I'm just throwing a number out there. It was minimal because I'm like, I'm not going to allow our phones to be offline. Now, granted, we've had some adoption difference, people trying to learn how to use it. And that's where I apologize. Some people have been disconnected because we're like, oh yeah, no problem. I'll transfer over there. Click, crap. Like I hit the wrong button, like it happens. But the reality is like the phone system now is far more thorough than it was before. Like we're able to track a lot more information. We can see a lot of the, the incoming and outgoing stats now. We can see our call volume. We can see how much time people spend on hold. We can monitor it for staffing reasons. We actually have AI integration now into our phones. So like
that's the craziest thing I've ever seen, by the way.
Dude, the note taking it can do on a call, like so we can see what's going on. So as a management group, we can go back and review things when something doesn't go the way it should. Like we feel like obviously we're still in the trial period right now of trying to get things going. But I think in the year from now, we're all gonna look back and be like, how did we survive without this? Right. And I start to think about that, like kind of planning ahead. Like that's why I did it, is like as growth continues to go, as ShopSabre continues to get bigger, I don't want our success, which was support and service, to diminish.
Right.
So we got to become more efficient and being able to have more tools at our disposal so we can better assist our customers and not make mistakes. That's why we do these things.
Well, and like you said, knowing and planning ahead of time so you're still ahead of the curve and not trying to implement this new phone system once it's too late maybe, or like.
Correct. That's the thing is I don't want to be behind the curve.
Right.
Like I don't want to be like, oh my God, we needed this 6 years ago, right? The other thing is like we can plan and schedule downtime right now. Because like I'm planning enough in advance where I'm like, okay, you guys aren't going to have phones for a few minutes while I do this, right? And like we said, we were down for, you said 5 minutes, I thought 15, but like we were 100% converted on this phone system in like 15 minutes. And I mean, most customers probably didn't even notice a blip in the system.
No.
Like, so the communication I think is key on that, like talking with your team, understanding what their needs are. I think that's something that's overlooked when it comes to this type of stuff. Being able to, start small, don't jump into it with, everything you have. And you don't need to buy a $250,000 machine when you don't have a machine now, right? Buy what you need, kind of look for experts for, advice.
And I think that, I mean, like you said, starting small is going to make it a lot easier to implement, right? If you do it in steps, like do a phone system here, a computer system a year, or whatever it is. Doing a little bit at a time instead of overwhelming your employees with 17 different changes on the same day.
Right.
Like it's just not going to work.
Right. Basically retraining your employee how to do their job because you've changed everything. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. But the other thing is taking advantage of like your vendors that you work with. Like for us, we're ShopSabre here. We have our support using us, like asking us for help when you don't know what you're doing and being able to troubleshoot something or optimize your flow. It's what we do. And I think that's a big part of it is that ask help where you need it. Like, do I need this option? Ask, do I need this feature? Like, what does it bring to my business? Have somebody talk to you about how it's going to, impact you, and really be thoughtful with your upgrades. Don't just, again, don't be the 18-year-old kid buying a car, right? Don't buy all the options. You don't need them all right away. Now, if you have the funds and you're not worried about it and you just want everything, cool, buy it all. But don't feel obligated. I think there's a lot of companies that they scare themselves out of buying something because they can't afford everything.
Sure.
And it's like all of nothing isn't a good thing, right?
Right.
When you can have a little bit of something. Get into the technology, get started before you end up finding yourself that, oh, I can't afford it all, so I'm going to have nothing, right?
When I bought my new minivan, as Chad calls it, a couple years ago, I wish I would have been the 18-year-old kid and got an automatic start. Because God, it sucks not having it when it's really cold here. I can't just stand up at my desk.
You went so you can dream other way. You cut corners on things that could have saved you.
Heck, I would have still had crank up windows if they would have not had power windows in it.
But that's a perfect example of like the 180-degree flip of this. Right? Like you can go extreme to buying everything, or you can go extreme at buying nothing. And there's a lot of people that do cut corners the other way. I'm not going to buy that because I'm not going to spend the extra $1,400. Well, for $1,400, you don't freeze your ass off for the next 6 years, right? Or,
I just figure, hey, I can take a break and walk outside, and Brandon's paying me to go start my car every day when it's cold.
Well, there it is. There it is. But I just think about vacuum systems, like buying too small of a vacuum pump or buying a too small of horsepower on your spindle. They end up costing you money in the long time because now your machine is limiting you on what your growth is.
For sure. Definitely take a long look at prioritizing the things that actually are going to matter, right?
Yeah. So I think in conclusion on this, like you have to invest in your upgrades that are essential to your growth, right? Essential to your company. You have to focus on solutions that fit what you're trying to accomplish. Know your goals, know what your employees are looking for. Implement things smoothly. Don't just throw things at the wall and hope something sticks, right? Whether you're adding automation, obviously you're improving material handling, dust collection, whatever, software, people, buildings, whatever, make it strategic. do a strategic move with it, bring whatever's closest to your growth to your business, right? Like
For sure.
what's going to help you grow? What is your bottlenecks right now? Start there. And then really, I mean, for that, that's kind of what I got. But you got anything more on this subject?
Not really on that subject, no.
Okay. Well, I got a motivational quote for the week that I want to throw in there, and that is, a difficult path isn't a sign to stop. It's proof you're headed down towards something extraordinary. So a difficult path isn't a sign to stop. It's proof that you're headed towards something extraordinary, right?
Facts.
And I think that a lot of people, again, when they start getting overwhelmed by something new, it's easy to back away from it. Oh, I'm not gonna pursue this anymore. Sometimes you are so close to success that you don't even realize it because you backed away from it. It's easy to walk away. Walking away is the easiest thing people can do.
True.
So
That is true.
yeah, so that's what I got. You got something?
I do, actually.
Let's go.
What do you call a mountain where no one sleeps?
Sleepy Mountain.
Mount Neverest.
Jesus.
Never rest.
Yeah, I got it.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go over your head.
It's because I'm short.
That and you have no bangs to catch it. Just goes right over your smoothly shaven head.
Thank you. You're ridiculous. Oh man,
I still on topic way too long. I needed to get back in character.
you did get back in character there. Honestly, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Obviously, we hope you enjoyed a little bit more about options, accessories, growing your business. Share it with other shop owners. Obviously, tell others about us. We're going to keep going down this path of trying to help you grow your businesses and your mindset and just considering all forms of your business. But in this episode, obviously, hopefully you considered some of the CNC upgrades that you can take advantage of. Obviously, if you got questions about CNC options or you want to know more about the CNC industry in general, we stand by ready to help you. You can visit us online, ShopSabre.com. You can call us. All of our sales guys are standing by ready to help. Our parts department's here to help you. We have even a online store now.
Yeah.
ShopSabre.com/shop. You can check it out. And yeah, obviously you can drop a comment, send us a message, whatever you want. And we're happy to chat with you guys. We'd love to hear more about the topics you guys want to talk with or talk about. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about plasma and laser and kind of talking about that world. And yeah, I think that's what I got this week. So thanks for tuning in to Talkin' Shop with ShopSabre. As always, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Nick.
Until next time, keep talking shop.